Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Hemmings and I'm here talking today with Scarlett Harris. And the reason we are talking is because she has released her first book. It's a bit of a mouthful. A Diva was a female version of a wrestler, an abbreviated Herstory of World Wrestling Entertainment. Hi Scarlett, nice to see you.
Hi Jamie, thanks for having me.
And you're talking to us from Australia, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So I guess my first question for you, when and why did you first become interested in writing?
So I've bum, interested in writing since high school, also interested in wrestling since high school. I studied writing at university, and I've been writing online for 11 years. So started at my website, The Scarlet Woman, and then I've been freelancing, essentially being paid to write for about 9 years, and writing about wrestling, being paid to write about wrestling for about 5 years.
What did you study in university?
The course was called Professional and Creative Writing.
Okay. Who is your favorite pro wrestler and why?
I don't think it's any secret to anyone who knows me, has heard me talk, or has read the book that it's Sasha Banks.
That was going to be my guess.
Look, like the person who inspired the title of the book, Beyonce, I don't think it's a matter of opinion. It's fact. She is the best, or one of the best wrestlers today, male or female. And yeah, it's not even close.
So I'm from Canada, and in Australia, I'm wondering what your access to pro wrestling was like.
Like growing up?
Yeah, did you get to see all the shows, or did you get kind of a summary show? I just wasn't sure if you got the same as we did in Canada and the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure there was like a summary show, so like Velocity or Heat or something on like free to air television. But I was lucky enough to have cable TV, so I was able to watch Raw and SmackDown. And like my origin story of wrestling is that I was watching it at a friend's house, and she was like tape trading and then giving me the tapes like after she got them from her neighbor. So like 2-3 weeks later, and I was like, wait, hang on, I could just watch this like on my own TV. And then like, yeah, I just kept going and everyone else kind of dropped off. But in terms of like local wrestling, I'm sure it was around, but I was none the wiser to that. Also, I grew up in a small town. So I live in Melbourne now, where I'm sure people know there's a thriving independent wrestling scene. But, at the time I wouldn't have known anything about it. But, obviously the WWE came to town, once a year. I think their first show back here was the Global Warning Tour in 2002. So I went to see, well, I actually didn't go to the show. I went to like Access or Fan Frenzy, I think they called it.
Okay.
And I met like Batista and Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar and Maven.
Okay.
If anyone remembers Maven. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't actually go to the show because I was a snob and was like, if we don't get first row, then I'm not going. And of course, that was like the equivalent of WrestleMania. So first row was like probably $700 plus. So I didn't go to the show, but I went to the fan event. And then every year after that, we made the trek. Made my parents drive me down to Melbourne to see the shows, and yeah.
So how does it feel to release your first book?
It's pretty exciting. It's pretty surreal. It sort of doesn't really feel real. And I'm someone that doesn't really rest on her laurels, so I'm always like looking for the next thing. So just trying to take some time to appreciate it and just like revel in the moment, I guess.
So can you tell me about the writing and research process, like how long it took to complete the book? Did you conduct any interviews? What all went into, I know you reference a lot of podcasts, so I know you're obviously listening to a lot of podcasts, but what went into research and writing the book?
Yeah, so there's no original reporting. Apart from an interview that I did with Becky Lynch for another article, and I used some of the stuff that she said that didn't make it in. But yeah, apart from that, there's no original reporting. So it's all podcasts, other books. I think you'll find that it's quite heavily sourced. I wanted to, because there are other wrestling books out there that aren't that way, so it's hard to find the direct source for a lot of things, especially in wrestling, because it is so heavily based on kayfabe, and it's like, well, what's fact and what's fiction. So I wanted to make sure that it was really well sourced, also because being a woman on the internet, being a woman in wrestling fandom, or any fandom really, it can open you up to criticism, or how do you know that, like you're just making that up or whatever. So I just wanted to, have that accountability. In terms of the process of like writing and researching the book, I'd thought of, like, I had the, genesis for the book probably about 2.5 years ago, but I didn't sell it until about 1.5 years ago. So it was like a year of kind of figuring out what would be in it, just evolving, the content, the title, things like that. And I ended up having probably about 1/3 to 1/2 of it already written before I sold it. So just, kind of writing it in my spare time, and, thinking about the ideas as they kind of evolved in my mind. And then, it was kind of a blessing in disguise that, like, we had a lockdown for the majority of the time that I was writing it. So that was, I don't think I probably would have made the deadline if I didn't have that extra time. You always sort of think, oh yeah, no, I can do that. But it ended up being obviously a lot more work than I thought it was, especially like the footnoting, the sourcing, just kind of making sure that like the style was all the same, and that sort of thing. And I ended up handing it in about 2 months ahead of time. So yeah, I maybe like, if there hadn't been a lockdown.
Thank you, COVID.
Yeah, exactly. I might have got in just under the line, but yeah, I ended up having some room to spare. So that was good.
So I have a really important question for you. This is one I struggle with. With all of its flaws, why are we still pro wrestling fans? Maybe you can explain it to me. That's a question I struggle with.
Yeah, that was one that was definitely on my mind in writing the book, but I don't think I've come to the conclusion. I think, for a lot of us who started watching when we were kids, it's just kind of baked into our DNA. And as much as, we would like to step away or have problems with certain aspects, which obviously I certainly do based on the content of the book. I think it's, as the first, the title of the first essay in the book is like, women's wrestling fans are suckers for punishment. So I don't know why we keep coming back, but alas we do. And I guess all we can really do is try to make it better.
Yeah, I think that's really key. It's just, you're thinking it's going to get better, hoping it's going to get better, and then you do get some progress, and then I think, as you've mentioned, you also get some step backs all the time, but I think it's about hoping it gets better.
Yeah.
Can you describe what it has been like being both a female pro wrestling fan and a female pro wrestling fan of women's wrestling?
As I sort of alluded to previously, and obviously all throughout the book, it can be pretty hard, because a lot of the time, especially with WWE, which obviously this book is focused on, it feels like you're unwanted a lot of the time, and that you're not catered to. And even with the like women's evolution, quote unquote, and that whole kind of marketing scheme surrounding that, you know, it sort of feels like lip service a lot of the time, and you know, cynically, it just sort of feels like where, you know, the progress in women's wrestling, and sorry, that's my dog barking in the background. The progress that's been made in women's wrestling, you know, it sort of just feels like it's because they realized we have money to spend, and not because of any kind of desire to do better because that's like the right thing to do, or because that's the way the culture's going, or because you know, something equality. So yeah.
Why did you choose to focus on the WWE as opposed to other promotions or pro wrestling as a whole?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, like that's kind of, I'm a WWE girl as much as I hate it also.
Behind me, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I've sort of said like it comes down to the accessibility a lot. Like, you know, with the WWE Network, it's the easiest thing to watch. Like, and you know, something that I grew up watching. So it was easy to kind of look back on a lot of the things I write about in the book. Because I had experienced them and watched them growing up, and you know, they'd had profound effects on me. So yeah, that's probably like, because I watch it, that's the reason why, you know.
This is kind of the first time I've seen content warning appear before each chapter in a book. I'm wondering why you decided to include that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it really accessible for people. Like, I'm lucky enough that you know, like some of the hard topics that I write about, you know, it doesn't really affect me, and I'm very lucky. But I know, like, you know, I'm in the minority with that. Like, so I just wanted to, you know, give people that warning that there is some really heavy stuff in there, and that, you know, they might not be in the headspace to read it at that time, so they could always, you know, put a pin in it and come back to it. But yeah, I think that's just the way like culture is going. And I wanted to, you know, have a book that was very much like rooted in that, and respectful of the readers.
Okay. A question you bring up in the book that you say you often get on social media is, why do you even watch WWE if all you do is criticize it? So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I sort of address that in the book. Like, you know, I think like nothing is perfect.
Right.
Like no piece of pop culture, well, okay, there are some pieces of pop culture that are perfect, but you know, 99% of them aren't. But I think, you know, it's our responsibility as consumers, as critics, culture creators, content creators, whatever, to you know, as I said before, want to make things better. It's important to critique things that are problematic in the hopes that, you know, the next time it rolls around, people can take that into account and maybe do better in the future. And, you know, wrestling is ripe for that kind of thing. So, yeah, I just think it's our like responsibility to kind of critique the things that we love and hope that they can get better.
So just keeping with that subject, what has your experience on social media been like? Because you're someone who's so passionate, very outspoken, I'd say even fearless, and there's still a lot of times such an old boys club mentality / gatekeeping with pro wrestling and its fan base. So I'm just wondering how your experience has been on social media.
Yeah, look, it's been pretty good comparatively. Like, you know, haven't really gotten many death threats or rape threats, so that's always a good thing.
It's so sad that you're like, we haven't gotten.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's the bar.
That's the bar.
Yeah. So look, for me, it's more like probably you know, first of all, I curate my timeline pretty thoughtfully and extensively. So I only follow or pay attention to people that I feel have, you know, valuable contributions to make. So, you know, I'm not really going to listen to or entertain like trolls or whatever. But yeah, luckily I haven't really gotten a lot of those. Probably the worst time was when I published an article about Ronda Rousey in Playboy, and that was the website's most popular article the weekend that it was published. And I definitely felt that, because a lot of dude bros on the internet had their opinion about that. But it was more because I was talking about like her transphobia, which there's a chapter in the book that like expands extensively on that, her transphobia, her misogyny, like just her problematic existence as a whole. And a lot of like MMA fans or whatever jumped into my mentions just saying like, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like I was talking about
of course, things she's
intergender, and how just like how her transphobia like doesn't really jive with the intergender work that she's done in WWE. But again, to just read the book to like find a much better explanation of that than I'm currently giving. But yeah, and they were just like, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about, blah blah blah. But it's like, well, I do know what I'm talking about. Someone paid me to talk about that, and it's clear that you didn't even like read the article, like you're just responding to like the headline or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty easy to take things like that with a grain of salt, because it's like, well, you didn't even read it, you didn't even engage with it. So if you were telling me something that was actually like valuable criticism, like, oh, hey Scarlett, like you could have been more sensitive in the way you described this, or did you take into account this or whatever, then I'm definitely open to that. And there has been a lot of feedback like that around the book, mostly positive, which is good, but I'm open to like valid criticism, but I'm not open to like abuse and trolls.
No. And nor should you be. No, I agree.
No.
So we talked about how criticizing the things you love and hope they get better. So I have to bring up that you have a chapter about the Bella Twins. I will confess I'm not a fan of the Bella Twins. I just don't relate to them. But I must ask you, what do you love about them? And that's not a criticism for me. You wrote so articulate about them and also explained why they're problematic. So I just found that very interesting.
Yeah. So like, I guess contrary to what you like, how you feel about them, like I do really relate to Nikki, especially. I could take or leave. But yeah, like I just think, obviously they do get a lot of shit for all of the things that I write about in the book. Like we don't have to go into it here. I'm sure like people are familiar with the problems that people have with them. But yeah, I just think like, they're a really important aspect of the women's wrestling evolution. Like we can't talk about it without talking about them, whether it's about their in-ring contributions or to a bigger extent, in my opinion, the eyes that they've drawn to women's wrestling through their work in reality TV, and then obviously now through things like their podcast, their merchandise lines, wine, etc. So yeah, I just I really relate to Nikki, having watched her like personal trajectory throughout Total Divas and Total Bellas, and I go into this in the book, but just her grappling with her own legacy as it is tied to John Cena, and not wanting to be a footnote in a man's legacy, wanting to carve her own path, getting lost in a relationship that is so much about the man or about a certain perception of them as created by reality TV. Also, sort of their storyline with WrestleMania 33, I think it was.
The proposal?
Yeah. 34? I don't know.
33 or 34, yeah.
Yeah, and just, yes. But by the same token, I do have some problems with them, specifically their sort of like performative or capitalistic feminism, or women's empowerment, as they prefer to call it. And yeah, I just, I didn't want to buy into the usual criticism of them. Like I wanted to, because I like them so much, I wanted to kind of do them justice by, you know, highlighting their contributions to women's wrestling, but also talking about how, you know, it may, what they've done may have just helped them and not necessarily like women across the board. But yeah, I have a complicated relationship with the Bellas, as I'm sure a lot of others do. And yeah, I've just kind of tried to like grapple with that and put it all down on the page in this book.
What changes in women's wrestling would you still like to see happen in the WWE? Like, what would a real women's evolution look like to you?
Yeah, so I've been asked this question quite a bit. I mean, I think obviously it's like equal pay, right? But I was thinking about it last night and like how I can kind of expand on it so that everyone who, like if someone's listening to every interview that I do, it's not the same thing. But I remember I wrote a piece for Paced Wrestling, RIP, about 4 years ago, and it was about quotas. And I think like it's all good, it's all well and good to say like, oh, equal pay, and like a lot of people have said that, like Stephanie McMahon, for example. It's like, well, you run the company, so if you want equal pay, just give them equal pay. But you know, that's,
you also say in the book, if you want Evolution 2 or Mae Young 3, she could do that, even though she said we're pushing for it. And I love that in the book. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, who's pushing for it? Like, you run the company.
High in the ladder, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, that's exactly to my point. Like, there needs to be something in place so that, oh yeah, like, you know, equal representation, like women's empowerment, women's evolution is not just lip service. You know, there needs to be something holding people accountable to be like, all right, this is, you know, how we're going. You know, I'd also love to see more racial representation. Again, quotas can help with that. And, you know, more queer wrestlers, whether that, and I'm sort of using that as an umbrella term. So whether that's, you know, like more gay women wrestlers, more trans and non-binary wrestlers, and like what does that mean for the whole gender binary of like women's wrestling and men's wrestling. So some discussions around that would be really cool. Yeah, just sort of opening it up, and it's like, all right, we reached the end of the women's evolution, as Michael Cole said at the on commentary for the women's main event of WrestleMania. Like, we've reached the end of the women's evolution, and it's like, well, who was that for? Because that was 3 white women, like 3 white cisgender straight, as far as we know, able-bodied women. Like, that's only one facet of like evolution or equality. So yeah, there's definitely more ground to be more ground to cover.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think we're going to get another Evolution 2 or get an Evolution 2?
I mean, eventually, maybe. Like, I don't know. I mean, what would it even like? I mean, it would mean something, but like if you're branding it as Evolution 2, it's like, well, what, the last one was like 3 years ago? Like, what is it? Like, I think it would have to be branded in a different way, because
it would have meant more if it was consecutive. Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. It just baffles me that there's not another one, like, and another Mae Young classic. Although I guess the argument for that could be that, you know, that it's an international tournament, right? And currently international travel is not viable. So I guess you could, you know, that argument could be made. But yeah, as far as an Evolution 2, it's like, no. And like, if anything, with the pandemic, like WWE has been forced to kind of reconsider what their product is and how they put things together. And like, you know, you sort of see that with some of the cinematic matches, but I feel like there's a lot of lost opportunity. There always is, but specifically, you know, you could have made the the Royal Rumble a cinematic match? Like, why does it have to be the exact same thing that we've seen for 30 years before? Like, you really had an opportunity now to do something different. Like, and yeah, there's an opportunity right now to do another Evolution or some kind of all women's pay-per-view or show. And yeah, it just baffles me as to why we're still waiting.
Are you a fan of the cinematic matches?
Yeah. Like, I'm here to see like something different, like surprise me. I'm kind of sick of seeing just the same old stuff, you know? So yeah, and we haven't got a cinematic match for the women. The AEW did the Britt Baker and Big Swole match. But yeah, like, come on, like Alexa Bliss, like that's a perfect character to have a cinematic match for. Yeah, like it's just, yeah. I would like to see more cinematic matches. Like, come on, like surprise me, do something different. Like, yeah.
So you got to attend, you say this in the book and you've mentioned it here, you got to attend WrestleMania 35, which was a big deal to a lot of us because it was the first time women were in the main event. So I'm wondering if you could tell me about that experience and what it meant to you as a female wrestling fan.
Yeah, so I kind of like grapple with that in the book too, because, and sort of what I said like at the beginning of this interview, like I find like I sometimes struggle to live in the moment. And so like while I was watching that match, I was sort of like not like, it was kind of an out of body experience, but like not in a good way. Like it was sort of like, oh, okay, like this is what I've been waiting for, and it's not that great. Like it was at the end of an 8-hour show. It was after midnight. It was raining. We didn't get home for like 2 hours after that. You know, and the storyline was completely like muddled leading up to it. So I remember being like super, super excited when like the first kind of whispers about it were happening, because I'd already planned to go to WrestleMania before that was.
That was your first attending WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like obviously coming from Australia, it's not like it's a thing that has to be planned. Like,
yeah, this is a big trip.
Quite far in advance. Yeah, exactly. So I already knew I was going. Like New York is like my favorite city. WrestleMania was there. I was like, all right, this is perfect. I'm totally going. And yeah, so I remember like after Survivor Series with Becky's, viral moment of like being punched in the nose and stuff, and her like calling out Rhonda, and yeah, like I just remember being so excited because I'm like, oh my god, I'm going, and it like could be a women's main event. So it was almost like the anticipation of like, oh, is it gonna actually happen, was better than like the actual happening. And as I write in the book, like not only because of the storyline around that match, but also like there was only one other women's match on the card. Like Asuka was completely screwed out of like her title. Everyone else was pushed into the pre-show battle royal. And yeah, so I think there were a lot of other factors surrounding that ended up like, it not being as great as it sort of had the potential to be. So
yeah, and the ending was such a letdown. I just remember, oh, that's it. This is what we've waited for so long. Yeah,
exactly. But what do you expect when you script a person who's never been pinned before to take a pin, that she's not going to know like how to do it? So
Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
In the book, you mentioned that you worked in an Australian wrestling company. I was just wondering, what was that promotion and what was your role? Like, did you train to wrestle, or what were you doing there?
No, I'm too scared of getting hurt to ever want to wrestle. And it always baffles me.
Ability like at all, so I understand.
Yeah, I'm not athletic. Like
athletic ability, that's what I meant.
Yeah, sorry. I like when I stand up from sitting down, like my hip hurt, like, not because like I've, injured it in sports or anything. It's just because I'm like old. Yeah, so the company was called Outback Championship Wrestling. That is no longer running, but it was run by some family friends, and who knew I was obsessed with wrestling, and so we just kind of like connected at my cousin's wedding in 2013, which was about when I started getting back into wrestling. I'd taken like a break just because. So they started a wrestling company, and they wanted me to do, like, I was like, oh, hey, like I could come on and be like your social media person. I could write recaps for the website and like, accompanying content like interviews with wrestlers and stuff for the website. And they were like, well, actually, we want you to be like the Renee Young or whatever, like the host of the show, like in backstage interviewing and stuff. And I was like that's not me, but if it means that I can do what I want to do, then I'll take the compromise. And so I ended up doing like a lot, actually. So yeah, like social media, the website, like hosting the TV show, we did a podcast and a short-lived podcast, and the company had a lot of connections with US wrestlers. So people like Tommy Dreamer, Joey Ryan, who I write a little bit about in the book as well.
I'm going to ask about next.
Okay, all right. Well, I won't spoil. I'll let you.
I do. Yeah.
I'll let you get your question in. And so that was cool because I got to meet like a lot of people that I grew up watching. But yeah, it just in the end, like wrestling is just so much like high school, which I'd graduated from like 10, 15 years beforehand. And I just was like, this is like, we're all adults here. Like this is not where I foresee my life going. And it made me realize that I much prefer consuming wrestling and engaging with wrestling from this side rather than the other side. So yeah.
So we're not going to see you debut for the WWE or in a Diva search anytime soon.
Well,
never say never. It's wrestling after all.
Yeah, exactly. But if anyone in WWE has read the book, I highly doubt. I think that bridge has been burned.
Probably. So you've brought up Joey Ryan, and you mentioned the book because you have a chapter about intergender wrestling. So you were originally going to have a quote from him. And of course, with Speaking Out movement that happened last summer, there were allegations about Ryan that came to light. And it's kind of one thing to hear about these allegations when you don't know the person involved personally, but you mentioned that you were acquainted with him. So I want to know what your initial reaction was to hearing that he was part of the names brought up for Speaking Out.
Firstly, I will say that, I'd heard, or some friends of mine had heard whispers about him several years before. So I met up with some friends when I went to SummerSlam 2017 in Brooklyn. And, just in conversation, someone said something, Joey Ryan. And I was like, oh no, like, I can tell you, like, Joey is like a really nice guy. Like, and I write in the book, like, of every wrestler that I've ever been introduced to or worked with or acquainted with, like he's the only one that treated me like a person and not like a novelty or just that silly bitch who knows nothing about wrestling or whatever. Like he just treated me like a person. And so I was like, no, he's one of the good guys or whatever. This was obviously pre-Me Too. In which 3 years later, I'm like, I'm not actually like, I would not be surprised by anyone being outed as like a sexual predator or a bully, a bigot, whatever. At this point, I would be sad, but I'm like not surprised, even if it was my own friends. Like I'm going to believe the victims or the survivors first. So when his name came up in Speaking Out, I was like, well, okay, like it doesn't matter what it doesn't matter that I thought he was nice to me. Like, there are multiple allegations from multiple people that he is a trash bag. So, you know, I'm like, it doesn't mean anything to me that someone who was like once nice to me, you know, I'm not beholden to him. So yes, I was, you know, very much in support of everyone who spoke out in speaking out. And yeah, it's, you know, obviously unfortunate that this is so prevalent in wrestling and you know, by extension all industries. But yeah, unfortunately it's not surprising. Yeah.
To me, the speaking out movement seems to kind of have disappeared. Like, it kind of came big and then just went away. And I'm just wondering, do you think it can be revived? Like, it's so important that it happened, but I was kind of disappointed that it didn't seem to last as long as I thought it would.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's hard to kind of see what the next steps might be. But yeah, I agree. Like, it was, you know, it was very much what it's called, speaking out. But what is the next steps? Like, very few people have been charged or even fired.
There's been some firings, but not. It's
yeah, but like look at like NXT UK. Like, half their roster is like alleged sexual predators. Some of the people being pushed on NXT and WWE, like, look who won a championship last weekend. Like, they're alleged sexual predators. People running the company are alleged sexual predators. Like, you know, so when you look at it that way, it's like not really a big surprise, is it, that nothing's really been done. But yeah, I think like obviously the next step is litigation, changes in hiring practices in wrestling. And I guess it sort of goes back to what we were saying before about like us as consumers and fans holding the companies that continue to hire these people accountable, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but then I think, like you mentioned this in your book, you know, enough people spoke out on social media about the battle royal named after the fabulous Moolah that was a Snickers, I believe. We're like, nope, we don't want that. So, you know, we do have power, but then the next step
I think it's just how figuring out like how we use that like as a collective, and probably there's other things that sort of go along with that, like unionization, like external bodies that can hold wrestling companies accountable. Like, you know, with Me Too, they established the Time's Up Foundation, right, which funds, you know, helps people pressing charges against their abusers for like court fees and other things as well. You know, some like it's probably something like that as well. And you know, I know some new companies as well are like, you know, they're taking all of that on board. There's a new company in Australia, in Melbourne, called Deathmatch Down Under, and they have, you know, like a code of conduct. Other companies prior to them had that as well, but this one just, you know, comes to mind. They have a code of conduct. They have an external body where people can report abuse and things like that. So yeah, I don't know how we're going to be able to change the old guard, but you know, obviously there's a lot of new people coming into wrestling, and hopefully they can be the change makers as well.
Do you watch death matches? You brought up the death match promotion.
I mean, it's my friend's company, so like I have to go and support them. But no, that's not my favorite genre of wrestling. The main event for that show was a light tube match, and I was like, light tubes are my safe word. Like, I had to like run away. I was like, no, I draw the line there. But some of the other matches, like, you know, there was a story there, and there was like, you know, some redeeming qualities that I was able to appreciate. But yeah, I prefer you know, just traditional wrestling.
I'm just discovering it because I didn't know a lot about it, and I'm kind of dipping my toe in the water a bit, but there's things like I don't want anything to do with animals, and yeah, the light tubes, I kind of go, ooh. And being a mom too,
oh my God.
I'm all like, oh, they're gonna hurt themselves, but I'm kind of trying to open my mind about it and learn more about it because I am a curious person. But
yeah, exactly.
You mentioned how WWE kind of made its foray into Saudi Arabia, and I have not been able to watch the WWE shows in Saudi Arabia because of my views on how they treat women, and the death of the journalist Jamal, I don't know how to say, Khashoggi or
something.
Yeah, I don't want to wreck his name, but for me, I just couldn't do it. So I was wondering your reaction to WWE taking their shows there, and if you watched them.
Well, I write in the book my reaction to the shows, which I haven't been, quiet about on social media and stuff, so I'm sure people can guess. No, I didn't watch the shows. I may have watched the 2 women's matches. I definitely did watch the Naomi and Bailey one, Natty and Lacey.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
She's not a fan of that one. Spoiler. You read the book.
Again, it's like, cool, 2 like white blonde women get to like make history. My reaction is that I think it's disgusting, and I will not support those shows, but also I have a subscription to the network.
So do I. Yeah.
So I'm being hypocritical because I do support them in other ways, and in the end, all that money lines the same pockets. So
that's why I wanted to ask you, because I'm kind of feeling like I didn't think you watched except for the women's matches, and then I know even
I don't watch regular wrestling apart from the women's matches, so regardless of where it takes place.
What are your thoughts on intergender wrestling, and will we ever get more genuine and frequent intergender wrestling in the WWE? I don't really know if I would count what's happened in the WWE as intergender, but I digress.
Yeah. Again, there's a whole chapter in the book about that, so I won't give too much away, but yes, I am a fan of it. I think the less gender segregation in wrestling, the better. And yeah, in terms of what's happening in WWE at the moment, and in, I guess the James Ellsworth storyline a few years ago, that's that, and what's currently happening with I forget his name, the sommelier.
Reginald or Reggie?
Yeah. Reginald.
Yeah.
I write more about the Ellsworth thing, in that any intergender stuff that we've seen lately, any serious stuff, so I guess there's the 2 matches, Ellsworth and Becky, and then Sasha versus Reginald on SmackDown recently. Let's look at the way the men that are involved are coded. Ellsworth was like, there was commentary from JBL calling him like an it, and like questioning whether he's human. So it's like, well, he's not even feminized as Reginald could be argued to be. He's just completely othered. And so, I just find that, the types of intergender wrestling that WWE has portrayed recently to be, quite problematic, and, just kind of like a, here, like, you want equality, you want intergender wrestling, here you go, like, now shut up and leave us alone, which is, what so much of the women's evolution boils down to, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Didn't we do enough? We gave you evolution. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, exactly. We gave you a women's main event. Now shut up. Like, I think that's like,
that's enough. Yeah.
A line in the book. So yeah.
Are there events or moments in WWE that you would have liked to have written about in the book? Because, like, of course there is a deadline, you had to turn the book in, but are things that happen afterwards that you were like, oh, I wish I could have written about that?
Yeah, so like I'd be really interested to see what eventuates with Bianca Belair's WrestleMania match and who she ends up facing. So obviously if it's Sasha Banks, and the fact that that is the first all black possible main event of WrestleMania. And I think I saw something on Twitter the other day that it would be the first all black pay-per-view match since like Booker T versus someone like 15 years ago or something. So, you know, I'd really love to explore that. And I think over like the pandemic, the last summer and stuff, there has been some increased racial representation in WWE. Like I think previously before you'd sort of like, it was always like a white person versus someone of color, but I think with like you know, Zelina Vega's stable and the Hurt Business and stuff, you know, there's more interaction between wrestlers of different races, which I don't really think you had seen before that in WWE. So yeah, like I'd be really interested to see kind of how that goes. Obviously I'm like probably not the right person to write that, so I'd love to see you know, some wrestling culture critics of color grapple with that. I mean, obviously the 4 Horsewomen chapter is, I think, the longest in the book, and I could like go on forever about them. Like I recently watched the Broken Skull sessions with Sasha and Bailey, and you know, I'm like, oh, I wish I could put that in the book. Yeah. Just the way they talk about like their relationships, and like sort of the notion of wrestling soulmates, which I write about in the 4 Horsewomen chapter. You know, I just love to like keep hearing them talk about that and keep kind of following like the evolution of their relationship in wrestling. So yeah.
So you have another book you're editing, and I'm gonna mess up this name too. It's Genji Kohan. Am I saying that right?
That's how I pronounce it. Okay. I've heard other people pronounce it other ways, but I think that's correct.
So if people are wondering who that is, she's the mind behind Orange is the New Black, Glow, and Weeds. What I wanted to ask you, of course, we got the news with the pandemic that Glow is not getting another season, how you felt about that and just the show overall.
Yeah, I was really sad to see that go, especially because it wasn't wrapped up. Like, that final scene of season 3, spoiler alert if you haven't watched it, with Debbie like doing the rom-com, like running through the airport to stop Ruth from getting on the plane and asking her to like come and work in her women's wrestling company. Like, you know, that's just like the possibilities of where that could have gone in season 4 were endless, and something that I like was not able to stop thinking about after I'd seen that episode like a year and a half, nearly 2 years ago now. So I was really excited to see what that could have been. But alas, we will never get to see that. Yeah, obviously I'm sad because like I just love that show and it was really good representation for women's wrestling. And
you got to write about it for New York Times too, is right?
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. A blessing in disguise, I guess. I don't know if I would have had a New York Times byline without the cancellation of Glow, but I'm really sad, as I'm sure a lot of people were.
We might get a movie.
Yeah, hopefully. Maybe it's just annoying because, well, first of all, I don't think any TV show or wrestling should be happening right now, but let's just put that to the side. It's annoying
that because I feel that way too. And people get mad, but I feel that way too. I don't feel safe. But
again, like I'm hypocritical for saying that, yet still consuming wrestling, but like whatever.
Yeah, I know. Still watching as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, we still need some entertainment. So yeah, it was just annoying the fact that one of the reasons given for the cancellation was that, you know, they couldn't ethically run a show about women's wrestling in a pandemic because of the close contact required for the depiction of the wrestling scenes. But it's like, but wrestling's happening.
But we got
WrestleMania. Wrestling, like you could probably, the way they shoot it could, hopefully be, less contact, or, they could quarantine beforehand or whatever, which we know WWE isn't doing, because we see Casey Catanzaro maskless, like with wrestlers from other companies every week. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously I don't think anything should be in production right now, especially in the US. Maybe you could come to Australia where we don't have any cases and film your shows, like Young Rock is filmed here.
Oh, you're saying wrestling. I thought she was saying I could. Sorry.
Yeah, you guys as well. Like I said, like I will marry someone so that they can come and live here.
I think my husband would have a problem if I did that just to get to Australia. But yeah, I'm in the US right now, so I'm feeling the COVID pain. I understand.
Yeah.
What do you want readers to take away from your book?
That's a good question. I'd like it to be the start of a conversation, I think. And I think it has been. Like, a lot of the feedback that I've been getting from people is like, oh, I never thought about it in that way before. So whether it just changes like even one person's perspective would be really good. If it can forward the conversation of like, considered criticism of wrestling, and not just kind of like a dismissal of it as like, oh, that carny bullshit, or oh, it's fake, right? Like, so just kind of if it can contribute to taking wrestling seriously as like a performance art or a piece of pop culture that is just as worthy of like consideration and criticism as other parts of media, then that would be cool. But yeah, I'm just really grateful that I've been able to be a part of the conversation in like such a way. And I'd love to see more women writing about wrestling in books, because as it stands, I believe I'm like only the third, although if you sort of take it as women who wrestle writing, there are more. So like some of the memoirs from the women in WWE, and I also include Heather Vandenberg in that, who blurbed my book, and she is a wrestler.
You wrote Unladylike. Love that book.
Yeah, which is a really good book. It's like a memoir of her experience in wrestling, but also just like very feminist and good. So yeah, but apart, like, so if you sort of put like wrestling memoirs into a separate category, then I believe my book and LaToya Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Women's Wrestling are the only two books about wrestling written by women. So yeah, like the more the merrier. Like I hope that we can get some more representation in wrestling media from women and people of marginalized genders.
Well, I definitely agree with that, because I just remember I started liking wrestling when I was 7, and I didn't know any other girls or women that liked wrestling. So for me, this is so great to read, your book, Heather's book. I haven't read LaToya's book yet, but we have covered it on Slam, just because I didn't know any other women. I could definitely tell you a lot of boys and men who liked wrestling, but this is just so great to be able to talk to a woman about pro wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I follow you on Twitter, and you're someone who's always reading, just a woman after my own heart, because I always am reading as well.
Yeah.
So I had to ask you some of your favorite, maybe not, and also not so favorite wrestling biographies and autobiographies.
None of them. No. Like, I don't know. They're like,
okay.
As an avid reader, they're not well written, so it can sometimes be a struggle. Look, Mick Foley is an actual writer, and his books are great.
Yes. So you liked one.
I also think that AJ Lee's memoir, Crazy is My Superpower, was very well written, even though, as I write about in the book, I found it very problematic, just about the way she writes about mental illness, about like her internalized misogyny, which was clear in the Pipe Bombshell promo, and things like that. So that would probably be like the best, like in terms of its literary merit, in just like the actual craft of writing. But I found it to be quite problematic. So I'm probably not going to recommend any. But there is a syllabus in the end of my book, which is just like, here are all the books about women's wrestling with, no comment included. So, if people want to read more, then there's a whole list there that they can go and read, and make their own decision.
Was there anything you wanted to add? Anything I might have missed that you wanted to say?
No, just thanks to everyone who supported the book so far. Thanks to you, Jamie, for having the book on the show and on the website. I think it's important to support content creators, women content creators in wrestling. So we've got to stick together. As you mentioned before, there's very few of us. Yes. I just want to thank everyone for like supporting the book and being and like receiving it so well as well.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for talking with me today. I've been a fan of yours since I read your contribution to Women Love Wrestling, that anthology edited by Jason Norris. That was my favorite book of 2020. And yes, we have to stick, us women writing about pro wrestling have to stick together, and maybe we need a support group. I don't know, but I just, all the best on the book. And thank you so much. And we enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jamie. You too.
Bye.
Bye.